All right, here we go. This is a fun one. Aftermarket parts. Do they suck? Yes. Yes, they do. All right, now obviously, not all aftermarket parts suck. This is a hard question. It's interesting. So over the course of the last couple of weeks, I have actually seen several people, different people on Facebook and Reddit, ask that question. Are aftermarket parts better? Right? Now, I'm going to come at this from a bullnose angle because, that question is so broad that trying to answer it for every vehicle and every type of part is just ridiculous. As a matter of fact, even for bullnose, the truth of the matter is that some aftermarket parts are better and some of them aren't. But there are a lot of parts that just aren't better. A lot of aftermarket parts just aren't better. And man, that was hard for me to grasp when I first started working on my truck. I got into working on trucks, these old bullnose, and I was like, I got this brand new, new to me, I got this new truck. I am going to fix it up. I'm going to make it nice and shiny and just get all the new parts, right? Because clearly a part that is new is going to be better than a 40-year-old part, right? Because at this point, they're 40 years old. So those parts the new parts have got to be better for a couple of reasons. One, they're brand new, so they're not worn out. And two, the world has had 40 years to figure out how to make all these parts better. So clearly, if I go down to, O'Reilly's or AutoZone or Napa or some of those places and get a brand spanking new part and pop it on that truck, it is going to be way, way better. Clearly, for performance parts, things like heads, headers, carburetors, fuel injectors, the new performance things, new aftermarket, especially if you get performance stuff, it's just going to be better. That's just the way that it is, right? That's what you're paying for. What I'm talking about is the replacement parts. Stuff that claims to be OEM, but really isn't. Stuff that, you buy from AutoZone or from O'Reilly's or whatever. Stuff like, I'm not picking on them because I've got a lot of these parts on my truck too, but like Dorman, right? Things that you go out and they just make replacement parts. Generally, we got to be honest, guys, those parts are not. So the whole point of me ranting in this episode is to tell you that for a lot of parts on your trucks, if you can keep them working, if you can, refurbish or somehow get more life into them, do that. Now, obviously, if you guys that are doing restorations that you want all original OEM stuff, this isn't an issue. It's for the guys like me that are just tinkering in their garage that want to keep these trucks on the road, right? And I wish when I first started out that someone had told me, Ed, those parts you're taking off and trying to replace, man, you probably ought to try to fix them instead. Because I did, man. When I first got the truck, I would take a part off and throw it away and replaced it with, something I bought off of Amazon, thinking that this thing on Amazon is going to be better. And that is just not true. Because in 40 years, what the world has figured out how to do isn't how to make these parts better, because nobody cares about an old F-150 part from 85, right? Nobody cares about that, right? What they care about is selling you something. And so higher quality generally doesn't sell as well as low price. That's just the way that's the world we live in. So what they've done is figured out how to make these parts cheaper in 40 years. And so where a part used to be nice, robust metal part, now it's all plastic. For a perfect example are the old school hubcaps. I'm going to be doing an episode about how to get those hubcaps on aftermarket wheels, right? Because you got to, make screw holes and all that stuff. But anyway, so those aftermarket hubcaps are all plastic. They're plastic. Whereas the original ones were nice, solid, metal, heavy duty. Now, are the plastic ones bad? No, they're not. They're not bad quality. They don't really crack. They don't really have any problems. They're just, plastic. So they're not quite as high quality. There are parts that actually will give you problems. Again, case in point, one of the first things I replaced on my F-150 when I bought it were the side mirrors. Because one of the side mirrors just wouldn't stay put. The little connection between the mirror itself and the mounting was wobbly, right? So I'd drive down the road and it would flop around, right? I'm like, well, I can't have that, So rather than try to fix the mount or to figure something out, I thought at that time, naively, that I should just buy a brand new mirror. I mean, look at these mirrors on Amazon. They're not that expensive. I mean, and it's a brand new mirror. It's got to be pretty good. Again, this is me thinking because I didn't know any better. And so I did. I went out and bought a couple of mirrors. And, well, if I'm going to replace one side, I may as well replace them both, right? So I spent a couple of hours trying to figure out how to get the old mirrors off and replace them with these brand new mirrors. The problem is that the old mirrors were metal. Nice. Solid. And the new mirrors were plastic. And yeah, the new mirrors would stay in place. They wouldn't flop around like this while I'm driving. But they shake. Like it's like, you can't even hardly use them to look at something behind you because they shake so bad. And the old ones didn't have that problem, right? They would flop around, but they didn't shake. And there's no way to fix the shake. You know why? Because the shake is there because they're cheap. Because they're made cheaply. They're not the big, nice, heavy metal mirrors. They are cheap, light plastic mirrors. And what's worse is I've looked, to my knowledge, you can't find a good aftermarket set of side mirrors that aren't made cheaply. And my dumbass threw the original mirrors away because I didn't know any better. So don't make the mistake that I made and assume that aftermarket stuff is just better. Now, obviously, this is a very nuanced question, right? Because not all aftermarket parts are worse. A lot of aftermarket parts are basically the same. I have a Dorman door striker on my truck, right? For closing the door and keeping it tight. My original one was, not great. It worn out. So the door wouldn't stay closed very well. It wobbled and rattled a lot. And so I bought a Dorman replacement door striker. And, I had to do some modification to it, sand it down a little bit because it was a little bit too big. But now that I've gotten that modification done, it works great, right? Another case in point is my windshield wiper motor. New one, aftermarket, works fantastic. Or the old one was garbage, basically. But I had to modify that to fit too. And that's another thing, is that, in 85, the trucks came off the assembly line. Those parts were made for that truck. They were made to exactly fit that vehicle, right? The engineers made them that way. The new stuff, that you get from, the store, aftermarket, a lot of that stuff, especially the mass market stuff, it's made to kind of fit, but they're made to fit multiple different vehicles, or they're kind of all made out of the same die or mold, depending on the part. And so they make minor tweaks to fit different vehicles. And so a lot of times you get that stuff and it doesn't fit. Either it's not quite the right size, or it's got some tweaks you've got to make it work. And that is totally normal, guys. Like, that is a totally normal thing. You will go to the store, you will buy a part that says it fits 1985 F-150 with an inline six, yada, yada, yada. The computer says it's going to fit, and you get home, and it just doesn't quite. Like, it's close, but it's just not quite there. And then you just got to make a modification. And you have no choice because there's no other part out there that's going to fit. I mean, it's one of the frustrating things about working on old vehicles. Now, look, I don't have a lot of experience with other vehicles besides the 85 F-150 and the 82 Bronco that I've got personally, right? I don't work on other old vehicles. I just haven't had that experience. I would assume that it's kind of the same everywhere. Like, you've got an old Corvair or, an old Mustang or something like that. You're going to run into the same kind of problems. Unless you're doing period correct OEM stuff, in which case your problems are even more because now you don't have even the option to go out and buy and modify a part. You got to go find the original out of a junkyard or a new old stock or something, which is why that stuff is so expensive, right? I mean, junkyard stuff's it's a pain to go to the junkyard and deal with the people. Around here, there's a junkyard around here. This is not a joke. There's a junkyard around here that if you don't speak Spanish, they won't help you. Like, they legitimately just blow you off if you can't speak Spanish. So that's just because of the part of the country I live in. I'm just saying that, sometimes dealing with that stuff is kind of a pain, right? So you just want to go to AutoZone and get something new. Right? But you guys that are doing actual restorations that they're period correct and stuff don't have that option. Anyway, I'm rambling. The point is, if you can keep that old stuff going, man, do it. I wish I would have kept those mirrors. I wish I hadn't taken them off and thrown them away. Because I'm confident now, looking back, that I could have figured something out to make it not flop around like that. And I would have had the original mirror and it would have worked way better. So, and that's just something you learn, right? As you go through and you work on stuff. But I'm telling you guys now, I mean, look, I don't know who's going to watch this video, right? I don't know if I'm preaching to the choir, or if there's, some teenage kid who just got his first bullnose who's all excited to get it running again. This video is really for that guy because, understand that just because it's new doesn't mean it's better. A lot of these old parts, they were designed by Ford engineers who knew what they were doing. They built them tough back then. And I know that, built Ford tough was a slogan. And I don't know that particularly, I mean, we all, wear our Ford hat and, oh, yeah, stupid Chevy guys. But I mean, really, let's be honest. I don't know that Ford was built any tougher than Chevy, right? Or Chevy was built any more like a rock than a Ford. But I do know that the old stuff was built tougher than the new stuff in terms of parts. Right now, clearly newer vehicles are not necessarily bad because, I mean, I'm driving a 2015 right now that I love. But when it comes to buying parts, the new stuff just isn't. It's just not as good. That's it. It's not as, because it seems stupidly obvious that a new part would be better than an old part, but they're not. That's not to say that there are not new parts out there that are better. Specifically if the new part's been designed to solve a problem. But man, non-OEM replacement parts are so shady. Like, you just don't know. It's like I replaced my my parking brake cable. I got a video about that. And I put the new parking brake cable on, and within 2 uses, it was toast because it bound up on the inside. There was some kind of a coating on the inside that just bound it up. It wouldn't move, right? So I had to go out and buy a different cable. And the different cable that I bought was a different brand. And it didn't have that weird stuff on the inside. And it works fine. It's worked fine since I put it in. That's the other thing that you don't know about aftermarket parts is a crapshoot. Some aftermarket parts are fine. And some are just garbage. And you don't know until you buy them. I mean, I guess if you're lucky, you've got some reviews that may say one thing or another. I mean, that's why, I tend to, if I buy a part from Amazon, if it does do me dirty, I try to leave a review for other people so that they know that it's, it's no bueno, right? That I did that for that parking brake cable. I'm like, it broke on me within 2 uses. So, don't buy this. And I hate to do that because, some manufacturer somewhere or some seller somewhere is trying to make their living. I mean, don't give me crap, guys, Sorry about the sun there. Welcome to morning time in New Mexico. So, yeah, I don't know. Simple one today, guys. Aftermarket part. But it's funny to me because I've seen several places online where that question has been asked very recently. And it's been several, like, within the last couple of weeks. And I thought that was funny, right? Again, because I'm beating a dead horse, but because the question seems so obvious, are aftermarket parts better? Well, of course they are. They're brand new. And that's just not true. But that's something that, again, it would seem so obvious. You don't realize until you actually work on the stuff that's not true. Newer is not better, especially with this stuff coming out of China, right? Don't get me wrong. I mean, I like cheap parts the same as the next guy, and I buy stuff from Amazon all the time because I'm a cheapskate. But I mean, let's be honest. Right? It's coming from China. Their job is to make things as cheap as possible for us Americans to buy as cheap as possible, because that's what we look at, right? We look at the bottom line. Unless you've been bitten a few times, generally you look at the bottom line before you look at the quality. And that's why they keep making parts like that, right? Because people keep buying them. So if you want Ed's word of advice for the day, the word of advice for today is keep those old parts working if you can. And if you can't, keep them around anyway, unless they are absolutely just junk and have no chance of being restored. Because you may buy a new part and find that you wish you'd kept the old one, like me when it comes to my mirrors. I have a old file cabinet in my garage that's been repurposed to hold old parts. Just, I got an old starter in there. I got all kinds of wiring. I got all kinds of bolts and nuts and, just old pieces. Because, man, you can't get that stuff anymore. It's funny, as a society, as a person, I'm talking personal experience here. I've been conditioned to believe that whatever I want, I can buy. Anything that I want, I can buy. I just got to open up the browser, go to Amazon, type in what I'm looking for, and there's going to be something that I can buy that'll do what I want. That is not true with auto parts. You cannot always buy parts for these old vehicles. So far from the question of whether or not aftermarket parts are better, there's also the question of whether or not aftermarket parts are even available. In a lot of cases, they're not. So word of advice for today again is keep those old parts working if you can. Whether there's aftermarket replacements or not, you're better served keeping the old stuff running if possible. All right? That's my take. So anyway, thanks again for watching, guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, gripes, internet ramblings, stick them below. We will see you
She's
next
rough
time.
around the edges, but she's doing fine. Tinkering away, getting things to shine. That Bullnose garage, she's considered divine. Thanks again for watching. We will see you next time. Thanks again for watching. We will see you next time.